not yet done the swearing in.
That's we can do that. So what I'll do is let you know when the live stream is active, and then I will announce that the mock trial is now in session. Sorry. So we are live now, Your Honor, and if you're ready to proceed, I'll go ahead and begin the session.
Thank you. Are the participants ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, we're having a problem with one of our witnesses. We can begin the opening arguments, but we might have some issues later on.
If there are technical issues that arise during the course of the trial, folks, just let me know and we'll deal with those as they arise, okay?
Great.
All right.
Our team is currently handling our technical issues with mics right now. So if you'd prefer, we can do pre-trial matters while we figure that out and then move on to openings, Your Honor.
Why don't we go ahead and begin the live stream, and we'll start with the swearing in, and then I'll take entries of appearances, and then we'll begin with preliminary matters as technical difficulties are being worked out, okay?
Great. So I'll just announce that this session of mock trial is now in session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Thank you, Mr. Weirs. I'll refer to you by your participant or your names of your witnesses. Good afternoon, everybody. I believe we are live. I'll just wait for confirmation. Our courtroom monitor is monitoring 2 separate courtrooms.
Apologies, Your Honor, I am here.
Okay.
I didn't hear the question.
That's okay. Are we live now?
Yes, you are live.
All right. We are now live, and we're going to go ahead and begin. First, I'd like to swear in all of the participants. So team members, please raise your right hands. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? If you'll unmute yourselves and answer it.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Witnesses, will you please raise your right hand? Do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? If you could unmute yourselves.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. I don't believe we should have any gallery members, but I don't believe we have any gallery members. So I'm going to ask the scoring panelists, if you could please raise your right hands. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Folks, why don't we go ahead and we will begin with entries of appearances. Let's start with the plaintiff. If I could have the attorneys enter their appearances.
I will be going first, directing Dakota Weirs.
Right.
I will be, oh, sorry.
Why don't you go ahead and say your full name and then tell us who you'll be handling.
All right, my name is Danielle Jensen, and I will be directing Carson Durst and going second and crossing Blake Dawncourt and giving the opening for the plaintiff.
I am Sophie Harrison, and I will be directing Dr. Casey Rogers and crossing Dr. Devin Williams.
Thank you. Why don't we have entries of appearances for the defense?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Audrey Hazelby. I will be giving the opening statement, directing Dr. Devin Williams, and will be crossing Carson Durst. Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Julia Apodaca. I will be directing Blake Doncourt and crossing Dakota Weirs.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I am Michelle Joe. I will be directing Skylar Weirs and crossing Casey Rogers.
Thank you. All right, let me just inquire. Let me start with the plaintiff. Do you have any preliminary matters that need to be addressed?
Yes, Your Honor. We have 3 matters we'd like to address. First of all, we would ask that the judge and jury be made aware of the 2 stipulated facts, which is that all signatures in the paperwork are valid and that the chain of custody is not in dispute for any evidence given.
All right, thank you. The court will accept those stipulations. Go ahead with your next preliminary matter.
We would also like to make sure that you, Your Honor, the jury, witnesses, and opposing counsel would be allowed to look at their unaltered exhibit notebooks when entering exhibits into evidence in order to speed up the flow of the trial and avoid technical difficulties that may come along with screen sharing exhibits. So we would like to make the assumption that everyone has their exhibit packet.
All right, thank you. The court does have the exhibit notebook available. Do the scoring panelists all have their exhibits available?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your
All right, so the court has confirmed that all exhibit notebooks are available to the court and the scoring panelists.
Thank you, Your Honor. And finally, we would ask that any remaining time in the plaintiff's closing be reserved for rebuttal.
All right, and the court will allow any remaining time for the plaintiff to be reserved for rebuttal in closing arguments.
Thank you, Your Honor. Those are all our pre-trial matters.
And for the defense, are there any preliminary matters that we should address today?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, folks. Again, I'm going to ask that everybody except the active participants turn off their microphones and cameras. The attorneys certainly can keep their cameras on if they so wish. And let's go ahead and begin the trial, starting first with opening statements. And I'll ask for the plaintiff to go ahead and begin with their opening statement. And just make sure to unmute yourself before you begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today because Lush Fertilizer was too lazy, too greedy, too negligent. Because Lush Fertilizer was too lazy, our client, Dakota Weir's life has been completely, irreversibly altered for the worse. Truffaut, a bonding agent created by Lush Fertilizer, has torn Dakota Weir's dream from him. Lush was too greedy, so Dakota Weir's will never have his dream realized of playing piano at Juilliard. We are here because Dakota Weir's cannot have his life back. And because Lush was too negligent, the same fate could fall upon others. Ladies and gentlemen, the definition of negligence is failure to use reasonable care resulting in the damage or injury of another. We have to prove, and we will show, that Lush Fertilizer manufactured a product containing Truffaut. We have to prove, and we will show, that the defendant was negligent by failing to prevent unreasonable risk to those who would reasonably use their product. We have to prove, and we will show, that our client, Dakota Weir's, would have been reasonably expected to use their product. We have to prove, and we will show, that Dakota Weir's harm resulted from the negligence of Lush Fertilizer. Today, you will hear the testimony of Dakota Weir's, a boy whose entire future was planned around his passion, piano, and how it was brutally torn away from him. You will hear how Dakota, in his landscaping work, was not forewarned about the dangers of using Lush Fertilizer's product. You will hear how, in a job where he would be reasonably expected to use such a product, the defendant tries to claim that Mr. Weirs was negligent when he was only doing his job. You will hear how Dakota Weirs, a healthy, active member of his community, developed a serious disease, a disease that we will prove could only have been caused by Lush Fertilizer. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is an environmentally developed disease. Dakota Weirs and his twin lived an almost identical life, except for Dakota Weirs' landscaping job. And yet, Dakota Weirs' twin did not develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Lush Fertilizer was too lazy, and Dakota Weirs developed cancer. Today, you will hear from Carson Durst, a former employee of Lush Fertilizer, testify that the company knew the risks of Truffaut. Not only were they aware, but extensive research was done on the matter, and a link specifically to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was found. Lush tried to cover up their findings. They knew there was a risk, and they knew how to prevent it. And you will hear that they did not. You will hear from the CEO of Lush Fertilizer that precautions that could have spared Dakota Weirs were not taken because Lush was too lazy. You will hear Dr. Casey Rogers, a man with extensive background in horticulture who studies the harmful effects of toxins on humans, explain that Truffaut is not safe, that those exposed to Truffaut, as Dakota Weirs was, are 10 times more likely than others to develop cancer, specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But Lush was too lazy to prevent this with a straightforward warning. They were too lazy, too greedy, and too negligent. You will hear how Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, knew that in using Truffaut, they were putting their users at risk. The defendant will try to tell you that Truffaut does not cause cancer. The defendant will try to tell you that the risk was not supported by balanced science. But we will show that Truffaut does cause cancer and that the science says so. You will hear how the defendant was aware Truffaut causes cancer. You will hear Blake Doncourt's admission that they knew that baking the fertilizer would prevent any danger of its causing cancer, but it was too expensive and Lush was too greedy. They will try to tell you that Blake Doncourt would have been going above and beyond by making the company bake the fertilizer, but it was never a matter of going above and beyond. It was a matter of profit. You will hear how Blake Doncourt would not bake the fertilizer because it cost too much money. They chose profit over principle because Lush was too greedy. They will also call Skylar Weirs, Dakota Weirs' own twin, who has taken a stand against him because of familial prejudice, with a gambling problem and a job writing about flat earthers and aliens, and how his bad relationship with his brother has caused him to have a biased statement. The defendant will call Dr. Devin Williams, whose sole job was to find dangers and prevent them in Lush's fertilizer, and how he utterly failed. You will see that in studies, Truffaut was found to be no better than any other fertilizer. They chose profit. Ladies and gentlemen, today you will hear how Lush was too lazy, how Lush was too greedy, how Lush was too negligent. If Lush cared, Dakota Weirs would not have lost all but his life. He would be out at Juilliard living his dream. Because Lush was too lazy, because Lush doesn't care, we are here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Dakota Weirs deserves compensation for the pain that Lush has caused him. Lush was too lazy, too greedy, and too negligent. Lush is liable. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If we could have the opening statement on behalf of the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Today, I am accompanied by my fellow attorneys, Ms. Apodaca and Ms. Joe, to represent Lush Fertilizer. Taking a glimpse at this case, two things are made crystal clear. Dakota Weirs has devastatingly been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and she names Lush Fertilizer culpable for this diagnosis. Upon further inspection today, you will understand that this unfortunate diagnosis for Ms. Weirs was the fault of many factors. Upon reviewing the evidence, however, it will become apparent that Lush Fertilizer is not at fault for Dakota's development of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. To introduce Lush Fertilizer a bit more, it is a company focused on making fertilizers healthier for the environment through revolutionary products such as Truffaut. Truffaut is a chemical compound which decreases nitrates in fertilizers, hence making it cleaner for the environment. This chemical compound Truffaut is also what Ms. Weirs believes caused her illness after seeing a story about it on TV. Miss Weirs is connected to Lush Fertilizer and Drufo through her work as a gardener. Since the age of 14, she worked at Haven Landscaping, a company that used fertilizers such as Lush, and it used several other fertilizers. Today, you will hear an in-depth detail about working at Haven Landscaping from Miss Weirs directly. She will also tell you about her working lifestyle as a gardener. But more importantly, she will tell you how this did not include her wearing any form of protective gear. And keep in mind that whilst working with these fertilizers, she worked with them every single day at her job. Dakota will also not be able to prove her damages today. Since no doctor has told her she can't recover, her damages are uncertain. And with uncertain damages, you cannot measure the exact implications of a certain illness or disease. The CEO of Lush Fertilizer, Blake Doncart, will also serve as a witness in this trial. He will provide you with information on the company and especially what goes into researching and testing products of the company. Following Blake Doncart, you will hear from Skylar Weirs, yes, the sister of Dakota, but more importantly, somebody who has spent a year reading and researching about the effects of Drufo. Though throughout this time, she has followed statistical evidence from credible sources such as the United States Department of Agriculture, the United States Department, to come to her conclusion that Drufo is not only safe, but a revolutionary and beneficial chemical compound. Today, you will also learn that no one fertilizer is truly safe. When you work with fertilizers day in and day out, that will increase your susceptibility to the harms that fertilizers bring. Our last witness today will be Dr. Devin Williams, who will dive deeper into this content. Dr. Devin Williams has been working in the field of toxicology for the larger part of his life. He has a PhD in toxicology and has performed many publications on the subject. During this trial, he will help provide insight on how cancer develops and how lifestyles may play a role into this. On the other hand, Dr. Devin Williams will more significantly tell you that Lush fertilizers are no more carcinogenic than any other fertilizers on the market today. And in conclusion, the defense would like to state that our intention is not to invalidate the fact that Dakota, he does have non-Hodgkin lymphoma, but it's rather to prove that Lush fertilizer cannot be blamed for this development. The evidence will prove that there was negligence on both the plaintiff's part and that the damages are uncertain. And it's also going to prove that Drufo is not significantly linked to any cause of cancer. And Lush fertilizer will prove that ultimately they are not at fault. Finally, because of these reasons, the plaintiff will ultimately fail to meet their burden of proof. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Why don't we go ahead and have the plaintiff call their first witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. We would like to call Dakota Weirs to the stand.
All right. Mr. Weirs, could you raise
Yes, Your Honor.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may begin with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
My name is Dakota Weirs, W-E-I-R-S.
Thank you. Mr. Weirs, why are you here today?
I'm here today because I believe an ingredient in Lush fertilizer, Drufo, caused my cancer, and I want them to be held accountable for it.
Thank you. Mr. Weirs, how has this cancer affected your life?
Well, over the years before my cancer, I've been active in my community, my school. I've worked summer jobs, and I love playing the piano. It was my main passion, but I cannot do any of those things anymore.
Mr. Weirs, why can't you do any of those things anymore?
I am now always in pain, and I am always tired. I can't even sit on the piano bench for any length of time without getting extremely tired and getting bruises. Sorry. And in fact, right here, right now, I'm in pain sitting in front of you here.
Before you developed this disease, Mr. Weirs, did you have any plans for school?
Yes, I was going to pursue my passion for the piano at Juilliard. I even had a full ride scholarship there. But now, because of my illness, I cannot do that.
Why is piano so important to you, Mr. Weirs?
Well, when I was young, my grandpa really got me into it. We would spend hours together. And when he died, the piano reminded me of him. And not being able to play the piano now has just felt like losing him a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Weirs. May I ask, does anyone else in your family have cancer?
No, not even my twin brother.
Did you do many activities with your twin?
Oh, we did basically everything together. Well, except for my landscaping job.
Thank you. Mr. Weirs, why do you believe that lush fertilizer caused your cancer?
Well, after I had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I was sitting on the couch like I normally do, and I was watching TV when a news story that a product in lush fertilizer, Drufo, was linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which coincidentally is the cancer I have.
Did you use lush fertilizer in your landscaping job?
Yes, I worked at Haven Landscaping, and I did use lush fertilizer since I was 14 up to the time I got cancer. Every single summer I worked there.
Your Honor, I would now like to direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 1 for identification purposes. Mr. Weirs, do you recognize what has been previously marked as Exhibit 1 for identification purposes?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain to the jury what it is?
This is the ingredients label on the lush fertilizer that I used at Haven Landscape.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of that label?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I move to enter what has been previously marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Ms. Apodaca, do you have any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, does this label show that there is Drufo in lush fertilizer?
Yes, it does.
Are there any recommendations on the label?
Yes, there are safety recommendations, as there were on all fertilizers I've used.
What are those recommendations?
It says to use protective clothing to cover exposed skin, and to use a N95 face mask or respirator for protection.
Thank you. One final question, Mr. Weirs. Was there a warning on Lush Fertilizer's label about Drufo and its causing cancer?
No, there was only the keep out of reach of children and eye irritation.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hi, Mr. Weirs. I'm just going to be asking you some questions today. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
So if you could look through Exhibit 1 for me, just go ahead and re-examine that. Are you there right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so under the user safety recommendations, the label clearly states to wear a mask. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you decided to ignore this recommendation and proceeded to not wear a mask when working with this fertilizer. Is that correct?
Yes, it was recommended, but it was not enforced.
Okay. And on this label, it suggests that you wear protective clothing when dealing with the fertilizer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you still overlooked this recommendation when dealing with this product. Is that correct?
It is not reinforced, so yes, I guess so.
Your boss told you to cover your face when working with these chemicals, right?
Yes, but again, it was not reinforced, so
A simple yes or no will suffice, Mr. Weirs. Thank you. So despite all of these
Objection, Your Honor.
recommendations,
What's the objection?
My witness has sworn to testify the whole truth, and the truth is not always just a matter of yes or no in an answer.
Any response?
yes, Your Honor. During these questions, I'm just looking for a simple yes or no answer, and these are questions that a yes or no answer can be applied to.
All right, the court's going to overrule the objection at this time and allow the witness's answer that was previously given. Go ahead, Ms. Apodaca, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. So just going to change subjects really quickly. You mentioned working with other chemicals on your job, is that correct?
yes.
And working with these other chemicals, you didn't wear any protective gear or clothing, is that correct?
Yes, just the same as Lesh.
Okay, so besides the fact really that no one else at your workplace wore protective gear, there was really no reason for you not to wear protective gear, is that correct?
I guess not.
And so you were well aware of the fact that you should have been wearing these protective gear and clothing when dealing with any kind of fertilizer, is that correct?
Well, it was not enforced, so
Okay, yes, Mr. Weirs, I'm just simply asking about you and your own personal choices at this time, okay?
okay.
So, I mean, couldn't you say that it's possible that another chemical could have caused your cancer?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to change topics really quickly and discuss the future and what that looks like for you, okay?
Okay.
So you have visited a doctor before and they've discussed what your future looks like living with this disease, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and your doctor has not told you that you're going to die in the near future, is that correct?
No, but there will be a lot of pain and hardship.
Okay, but no doctor has told you that you're going to die in the near future, right?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, and no doctor has told you that
Objection
you
asked and answered.
All right, thank you. Folks, if I could take just a moment, I apologize. I am in real life the on-call judge and I'm getting a phone call. We're going to take a very recess. I promise it'll be very brief and we'll be right back and I will rule on your objection, okay? All right, folks, I do apologize. Why don't we go ahead and resume? And if I could ask counsel to restate their objection for me.
Yes, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. I was just simply looking for a clarified answer because it seemed that Mr. Weirs avoided my question previously that I asked.
Overruled.
If I may respond, Your
Oh.
Honor.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Weirs answered her question directly the first time, and so it was overkill to re-ask.
All right, thank you. I'm going to overrule the objection at this time. And Mr. Weirs, if you could go ahead and answer the question, and perhaps Ms. Apodaca, you can restate your question.
Yes, Your Honor. I was just asking and saying that, like, your doctor has not told you that you were going to die in the near future. Is that correct, Mr. Weirs?
That is correct.
Okay. And no doctor has told you that you can't make a recovery from this disease. Is that correct?
It was kind of up in the air. I'm not sure what will happen.
Okay, thank you. But you could definitely say that surviving is still very much in the picture for you. Is that correct, Mr. Weirs?
I suppose.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. No further questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Weirs. You may step down.
Thank
Counsel, would you call your next witness, please?
Your Honor, our last attorney would like to redirect. Is that at all possible?
I may inquire of the courtroom monitor, but I don't believe what I read that the rules allow for redirect examination.
Judge, this is scoring Judge Bill McAdams. I've done this for years and they do allow, just so the
They
court's
do
aware.
allow? Okay. Sure, I will allow for a brief redirect examination. Thank you, Mr. McAdams.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, did anybody else at your landscaping job wear protective gear?
No, I was not the only one.
And one more question. Can you tell us how cancer is changing everything in your life?
Yes, certainly. As I have said before, I am always in pain and I have fatigue and shortness of breath. I can hardly do anything now, except for basically sit on the couch. Everything has been stripped away from me, especially my passion of the piano.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Is there any recross examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Weirs, I would just like to reiterate the fact that this was a personal choice that you made to not wear protective clothing when on the job, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have. No further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. If the plaintiff could please call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would like to call Carson Durst to the stand.
All right. Good afternoon, sir. If you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may go ahead and begin with your questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Carson Durst, D-U-R-S-T.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm the head of research and development at Terrace Greenery.
And how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this for about roughly 20 years.
When did you start?
I started back in 2003 at Lush Fertilizer.
And who were you working for?
Lush Fertilizer on the research and development team.
Thank you. And where do you work now?
Currently, I am the head of research and development at Terrace Greenery.
And do you have any certifications, Mr. Durst?
Certainly I do. I graduated with a bachelor's in chemical engineering from Arizona State University.
What other experience do you have?
Well, I have roughly about 20 years of experience in the research and development area. I started back in 2003 So that gives me roughly about 19 years of experience.
Thank you. Your Honor, I move to enter Carson Durst as an expert witness in matters relating to the efficacy and safety of fertilizers.
Ms. Hasselby, do you have any objections?
Yes, Your Honor. Lack of foundation.
I'm going to.
Your Honor.
Go ahead and make a response.
Sorry, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst has been working in the field for over 20 years, and he is the head of his department at his job currently, which means that he has to understand the field thoroughly.
All right, thank you. I'm going to overrule the objection and admit the witness as an expert in the areas outlined by plaintiff's counsel. You may continue with your questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, how did you get your job at Lush Fertilizer?
Well, as many young people start on their careers, I was offered an internship by a close family friend, Blake Doncourt, who is the CEO of Lush.
And how did you know Mr. Doncourt?
His son Charles and I played on the local soccer team together, and we were very close.
And when did you start with Lush Fertilizer?
I started in roughly July 2003, right out of college.
And what did you do there?
I was a product development engineer and the research and development team.
How was your early experience at Lush?
It went very well. I rose up from intern to full-time position in merely months.
And what did you do in your full-time position?
We worked on developing Drufo.
What is Drufo?
Drufo is a chemical bonding agent in many of Lush Fertilizer's products. It helps essentially preserve the product for more longevity.
What did the Drufo development process involve?
Our team was specifically tasked using a chemical in Drufo called nitrogen phosphorus carbonate and testing the possible safety hazards that it might pertain.
What did these tests and studies find?
Well, I found a study conducted in Britain that resulted in this chemical compound causing cancer in rats.
Thank you. And what were the results of this study?
The study practically concluded that with more dosage of this chemical being exposed to rats, much higher probability of them developing leukemias or lymphomas.
Thank you. Could you simplify that for the jury?
Basically, Drufo causes cancer in rats.
In your expert opinion, Mr. Durst, what conclusions can be drawn from this study?
Well, since many studies conducted on rats can be then transferred to humans, that's the main reason we conduct studies on rats so much, because they're usually transferred over. So therefore there's a high probability that this compound can cause cancer in humans as well.
Thank you. When did Lush begin the second study of Drufo, Mr. Durst?
Well, after the first study concluded, concerns arose that Drufo could possibly be linked to cancer in humans. So we were instructed to begin a new study on Drufo's possible carcinogenic effects.
Thank you. Mr. Durst, do you have your exhibit booklet with you today?
Yes, I do.
Could you please turn your attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4? I would like to draw the court's attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4 for identification purposes. Your Honor, I would ask the court to direct the opposing counsel's attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4. Mr. Durst, have you seen this before?
Yes, I have.
Could you explain to the jury what this is?
This is an email from my manager at Lush, Gary Langley, describing to the R&D team about our procedures that we should take on the new study on Drufo's possible carcinogenic effects.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the email you received?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I move for the addition of what has been previously marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Ms. Hasselby, do you have any objections?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 4 will be admitted.
Thank you. What was the conclusion of this study, Mr. Durst?
Well, in the final conclusional meeting of this study, our team found that Truffaut could possibly be linked to not only cancer, but specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But management told us to keep it under wraps until further analysis was performed.
So for clarification, was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma ever specifically discussed?
Solely in that meeting.
And were any recommendations made that would eliminate the risk of Truffaut's causing cancer?
Yes, it was recommended that Lush bake Truffaut-containing products to reduce the possibility of carcinogenic effects, but Lush did not proceed on this.
Thank you. Did Lush know the dangers of Truffaut, Mr. Durst?
Yes, it is, and they decided that profits.
Hold on one moment, Mr. Durst. There was an objection, Ms. Hasselby?
Yes, objection for speculation.
Response?
Your Honor, this does not call for speculation because Mr. Durst worked for this company and he was there for this. And he was aware of the fact that they knew because he was involved.
Hasselby, do you have a reply?
The question at hand is asking Mr. Durst to come to his own conclusion, not the conclusion of a group.
Your Honor, may I respond?
I'm actually I'm going to decide at this point in time, so I'm not going to allow you to respond further. The court Mr. Durst has been admitted as an expert to testify in these areas, so I'm going to overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, how did your work life change after these studies were concluded?
After these studies concluded, my manager, Gary Langley, started giving me poor performance reports, but I can assure you that I was doing at least the same quality work, if not even better. So I was put on work probation.
And how did your association with Lush Fertilizer end?
Well, after these performance reports just kept coming, I decided that my future at Lush was gone. It was almost as if Lush, or Gary Langley specifically, had something against me, perhaps pertaining to the Truffaut studies. But regardless of this, I saw the writing on the wall and started looking for alternative jobs in the same field.
After being fired from Lush, where did you go?
By the time I was fired at Lush, I had found a job at Terra's Greenery, a similar company in the fertilizer industry.
And how did Mr. Doncourt react?
Mr. Doncourt reacted by filing a lawsuit against me, claiming that I broke non-compete agreement and that I could not go to work for Terra's.
And how did this legal battle result?
Well, the court settled in my favor, and they decided that I could go work for Terra's after a period of 6 months instead of 2 years.
And how is work at Terra's Greenery?
Work at Terra's has been very good. Over the course of my career there, I've got a promotion to head of research and development.
And in your expert opinion, Mr. Durst, is Truffaut safe?
No, it is not.
Thank you, Mr. Durst. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hasselby?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Durst. My name is Audrey Hazelby, and today I will be asking you a few questions, okay?
Yep.
I'd like to touch on the study you mentioned about Truffaut being possibly carcinogenic in rats. Okay? And did you ever find any study that said results were adverse in humans?
No, because it is unethical to test and expose humans to carcinogens.
That's not the question I asked. Let me reiterate, please.
Objection, Your
Did you
Honor.
find,
Asked and answered.
Do you have a response, Ms. Hazelby?
yes, Your Honor. The question at hand either happened or didn't happen. Therefore, it can be answered via a yes or no answer.
Your Honor, may I respond?
You may reply. Go ahead.
My witness did answer. He said no.
And the court is going to sustain the objection, finding that the witness answered the question.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. I'd like to talk a little bit more about your relationship with the Doncourts. Is it true that you and Charles Doncourt were best friends growing up?
Yes.
You two even went to college together?
Yes, we did.
Is it correct to say you were very close with the Doncourt family?
Yes.
And this would include Blake Doncourt, Charles Doncourt's father?
Yes.
And Blake Doncourt is the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, correct?
Yes.
And in 2003, you began working for Blake Doncourt's company, Lush Fertilizer, is that correct?
Yep.
And you started as an intern?
Yep.
Is it true that internships such as these are rare for people without any work experience?
Yes, that is true.
So your relationship with the Doncourt family played a role in your internship, correct?
Yes, it did.
However, you no longer work for Blake Doncourt's company, correct?
No, I do not.
Is it true that you were fired from your job?
Yes.
And prior to your termination, many coworkers and staff at Lush Fertilizer made complaints about you, correct?
Well, that wasn't really what I heard. All I heard was from Gary Langley, his complaints.
So you did not receive any complaints from coworkers or staff at Lush regarding your work?
It's a possibility, but I'm not certain.
All right. And did you have to sign a performance improvement plan? Sorry, it looks like the internet may have cut out. If I may re-ask that question.
Yes, I think we had
Can you hear
we can hear you, Mr. Durst. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I said yes to that question.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And would it be correct to say that this made you feel upset towards Blake Doncourt?
Yes, it did. A little bit.
And you began searching for new jobs then, specifically one at Terrace Greenery, is that correct?
Well, Terrace Greenery was one that I just encountered in the field. It wasn't specifically for Terrace Greenery. But I was looking for a job in the field because I have experience.
And at the time, you were aware of the extreme rivalry between the two companies, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving forward, Carson, I will be asking a few questions regarding your confidentiality agreement with Lush Fertilizer. Carson Durst, would you please review your case materials for Exhibit 5 and let me know when you are ready to proceed?
I'm ready.
You signed this confidentiality agreement with Lush Fertilizer on June 1st, 2003, correct?
Yes.
My apologies, Mr. Durst. Oh, thank you. And your name and position are included on this document, correct?
Yes, they are.
Everything on the document is accurate?
Looks so.
Your Honor, Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 5 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 5 will be admitted.
Your Honor,
Yes.
there appears to be a time dispute between the plaintiff recross and the defense recross.
Yeah,
About
I would just like to say that the defense just have 20 minutes, not 25, and that's why there's a gap of almost 3 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, that must be a mistake on my end. I will correct my timer. Thank you.
Okay, so the timekeepers are now on the same page?
Yeah, it should be right now in 9 minutes and 58 seconds for the defense.
Okay,
Okay, understood. Thank you.
thank you. Ms. Hazelby, why don't you go ahead and resume?
Thank you. Mr. Durst, would you mind reading the first sentence of Agreement 1, Non-Compete Covenant?
During employment and for a period of 2 years after the separation of employment for any reason, the employee will not directly or indirectly engage in any competition business and shall not become directly or indirectly engaged in any business that would benefit from disclosure of Lush's trade secrets.
Thank you, Mr. Durst. And you would begin working for Terrace Greenery 6 months after your termination from Lush, correct?
Yep.
Thank you. And finally, my remaining questions for you. Address your work with Drupa while working at Lush Fertilizer. Is it true that you were involved in many in-house studies testing whether Drupa was possibly carcinogenic?
Yes, 2 to be precise.
And scientists worked on these tests with you as well, correct?
Yes.
And when the study was concluded, you received the full results of the study, correct?
Yes.
And by law, for a chemical compound to be deemed safe, it has to fall below a certain legal parameter of its likelihood to be carcinogenic, correct?
Yes.
And it's true that the study did indeed fall below that legal parameter, correct?
Well, that's what management claimed.
Thank you, Mr. Durst. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, is there any redirect?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, why doesn't the plaintiff go ahead and call their next witness?
The plaintiff would now like to call Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
All right, Dr. Rogers, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
All right, you may go ahead and begin, Counselor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Casey Rogers, Rogers.
Can you explain to the jury what you do for a living?
I am a professor at the University of California at Berkeley in the Horticulture and Entomology Department.
Folks, I'm sorry to interrupt. Counsel and witness, you may each need to mute when the other is speaking. I think that's what's causing all the feedback. Okay, go ahead and begin.
I will restate my last question.
And I think we got that. Go ahead and move. I'm sorry. Go ahead and move forward with
Okay.
your next question.
Professor, what are your academic credentials?
I have a PhD in agriculture and entomology from the University of California at Berkeley and a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture and Chemistry from CSU.
Do you have any other relevant previous experience?
I was a research analyst for a large multinational company.
I would now like to draw the court's attention to what has previously been marked as Exhibit 6 for identification.
Okay, go ahead.
Are you ready, Dr. Rogers?
Yes, I am.
Have you seen this before?
Yes, I have.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of what you have examined?
Yes, it is.
Would you describe it for the jury, please?
Yes, it is my curriculum vitae or my CV, which entails my relevant employment or education experience, excuse me.
What does this experience include?
I primarily studied pesticide chemistry and toxicology, among other things.
Your Honor, I move for the admission of what has previously been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 6 into evidence.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 6 will be admitted.
Thank you. And I would now like to draw the court's attention to what has previously been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 7. Have you seen this before, Professor?
Yes, I have.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of what you've looked over?
Yes, it is.
What is it?
It is my related peer-reviewed research publications.
What did the research for these publications involve?
Me studying various different chemicals, specifically Drufo.
How long have you been studying Drufo?
Since 2013.
And what studies exactly have you conducted?
I conducted a weed resistance to Drufo, or 2 studies on weed resistance to Drufo in both 2013 and 2019, and 2 studies on the harmful effects of human exposure to Drufo, along with its carcinogenicity.
Your Honor, I move for the admission of what has previously been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 7 into evidence.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 7 will be admitted.
Your Honor, I now move to have this witness recognized as an expert in pesticide toxicology, specifically involving Drufo and its harmful effects and carcinogenicity.
Any objection?
No objections.
The witness will be so admitted.
Thank you. Earlier, you mentioned some of your studies. Can you describe how they were organized?
Yes, I conducted a study with 3 groups. A control group, which was a group that was not at all exposed to Drufo, a group who was occasionally exposed to Drufo, and a group who was daily exposed to Drufo.
Excuse me, I forgot to unmute. What did you monitor these groups for?
For various health conditions.
What was the outcome of this study?
There was an increase in health conditions with the 2 groups that were exposed to Drufo.
What was included in this list of health conditions?
Various different cancers, including non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And is non-Hodgkin lymphoma possibly caused by genetic factors?
No, only by environmental factors.
And can it be cured?
Sadly, it can't.
Based on your previous research experience and your examination of this specific case, what is your expert opinion in regards to Ms. Weir's and her exposure and his exposure?
It is highly medically probable that Mr. Weir's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was caused by his exposure to the deadly chemical Drufo.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions, Dr. Rogers. First off, you and other researchers don't know or have not touched on the exact cause of Ms. Weir's illness. Is that correct?
Yes.
You also researched other potentially carcinogenic substances. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then is it possible that these substances alone caused the illness rather than Drufo specifically?
It could be, yes.
And also, didn't you say you believe Drufo was rushed to the market without sufficient studies on its safety?
Can you repeat that question? My computer was breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't you say that you believed Drupa was rushed to the market without sufficient studies on its safety?
Yes, I did.
But you didn't know if Lush had taken any precautionary measures. You just believed that they had. Am I right?
Yes.
And you've been examining ways to mitigate and prevent exposure to Druvo, correct?
Yes, I have since 2013.
You said that long sleeves should definitely be worn for those working closely with Druvo. Isn't that right?
My computer is frozen. I cannot hear anything currently.
Okay, and it does appear that the witness's computer's frozen screen has changed at all despite us hearing what she's saying. Why don't you go ahead and try to turn off your camera for a moment? All right, and then try to turn your camera back on and see if that
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now. Why don't you try turning your camera back on and seeing if the bandwidth is sufficient?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm sorry. I was kicked out for a second.
Okay, great. Okay, shall I continue then?
Yes.
Okay. You said that long sleeves and long pants should definitely be worn to prevent absorption of chemicals for those working closely with Druvo, right?
I did.
You also said that a protective face mask should be worn, right?
Yes.
Please direct your attention to what has previously been labeled as Exhibit 1 in your materials. Okay, I'm showing
All right,
you
I'm there.
Okay, I'm showing you what's been previously admitted into evidence. Please let me know when you're done reading it.
I'm done reading it.
Can you tell us what this is?
It is the label to the fertilizer that Mr. Weers used in while using Lush's fertilizer.
Thank you. And Lush's packaging labels provide the same warnings and suggestions that you did. Isn't that right?
They do.
Oh, okay. And moving on, there's also a high survival rate for non-Hodgkin's. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Also, you've never testified as an expert in court of law before. Isn't that correct?
No, I have not. This is my first time.
You said that more lawsuits would open up, and didn't you want to testify in those too?
I did.
Testifying as an expert in court is a big deal, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And is it true that you're getting paid to testify as an expert right now?
Yes, I am.
So if you were to testify in further cases, you would probably get paid to testify in those as well. Isn't that right?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance?
Response?
Your Honor, this is always relevant as Your Honor, this is always relevant as we are bringing into question the credibility of the witness.
Is there a reply?
Yes, there is, Your Honor. The witness, just like any other expert witness, has been paid to be here, but this witness has also testified that they will tell the whole truth. Just because they're being paid to be here, just like any other expert witness, does not mean that their opinion does not hold weight.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, may I respond?
No, I'm not going to allow for a response. I am going to issue a ruling and find that this is relevant to whether there's any motive or bias related to the testimony. I'm going to overrule the objection.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. If I may go on, would you agree that you are financially motivated to testify in these cases?
Yes, I am, but like as any other expert witness.
And wouldn't you say that one could make quite a lot of profit from testifying in court?
Yes, but every expert witness can.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Rogers, Did you look at anything aside from health conditions in your study?
Yes, I did.
What did you look at?
I looked at the results of this study that were inconclusive because of the long-term time period that was supplied here, or the long time period that was not supplied here, as well as the workers were not given the proper equipment for me to continue this
Apologies, what was inconclusive?
study, the results of the study.
This is just a clarification question, Your Honor. What part of the study?
The long-term effects of the study.
And the part of the study where you looked at health conditions, what were the results of that part of the study?
That part of the study was inconclusive.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Do the plaintiffs have any additional witnesses?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, why don't we go ahead and move to the defense case in chief? Would the defense please call their first witness?
Hi, Your Honor. The defense calls Blake Doncourt to the stand.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Duncourt. Would you please raise your right hand? I don't know what's going on here. You might have some other computers on in the room you're in. There we go. Mr. Duncourt, do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And if you could have any other computers that are on in the room you're in, mute.
Just your volume. Turn your volume on.
I apologize. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, and I don't think there's any feedback now. All right, Ms. Apodaca, why don't you go ahead and begin?
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you please say your name for the record?
I'm Blake Doncourt.
Thank you, Mr. Doncourt. What is your relation to Lush Fertilizer?
I am the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
How long have you worked for Lush Fertilizer?
It's been 22 years now.
What has your role been in developing Lush as a company?
Since 2000, I've basically been trying my best to make sure our company has grown and basically just helped out as any way I could.
Thank you. What does Lush value as a company?
I say we mostly value the safety of our employees and our customers, and yes.
Can you tell me what Lush does with the profit that it gains as a company?
10% of our annual profits each year tend to go to charity.
Great. What are these charities working towards?
Just to name a few, some of our charities are helping to clean the ocean, and also helping to clean the environment too.
Thank you. What are some things that Lush has done directly to help with educating people about environmental issues?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm just simply seeking to look at what Lush does as a company to help promote environmental awareness and just looking at what some Lush really does value as a company.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may reply, go ahead.
What Lush does for the environment has nothing to do with Dakota Weir's damages, which is why we're here today.
All right, I'm going to sustain the objection.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. So I would just like to change topics. Would you have allowed Lush's products to be on the market if they were carcinogenic?
No, we would have never done that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Doncourt. And did your research team discover any carcinogenic properties in your products?
To my knowledge, my research team has not given me any evidence that supports the effects of carcinogenic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Doncourt. Just like to change topics really quickly. Can you describe your relation to Carson Durst?
He was a former employee for our company who has since left to our rival company, Terra Greenery.
Okay, is there anything else that you'd like to add or elaborate onto that?
No.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Doncourt. So do you say, like, would you say that Lush really values the health and well-being of its employees and customers?
Yes, like I've stated
Objection
before,
leading.
Response?
Yes, I was just going to simply ask Mr. Doncourt what really Lush does prioritize. Can I please rephrase that question?
Certainly, please rephrase. The court will sustain the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, so does Lush, sorry, give me 1 second, excuse me. Mr. Doncourt, so would you say that you reflect, sorry, excuse me. So does Lush prioritize the safety of its customers?
Yes.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, you said there was no valid evidence that directly links Drufo to cancer.
Can you restate that, please?
Yes. Mr. Doncourt, you said there was no valid evidence that directly links Drufo to cancer,
Yes, to my knowledge.
but there was evidence.
What evidence are you talking about?
You said that there was no valid evidence, implying that there was evidence.
I'm sorry, can you just state what evidence you're talking about right now?
Mr. Doncourt, there was evidence that Drufo causes cancer. You just didn't believe it to be valid.
You're saying evidence. What evidence are we talking about here?
I'm talking about the evidence that Drufo causes cancer, Mr. Doncourt.
But what evidence? Like,
Resulting from the
I
studies
said
your
there is no
company did,
evidence.
Mr. Doncourt, there was a link to Drufo's causing cancer.
Objection,
cut
lack
out.
of
What did you say?
personal knowledge.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Hold on just a moment. The computer cut out, so I didn't hear the objection. Would you, Ms. Apodaca, would you just restate the basis for your objection?
Yes, I said lack of personal knowledge.
Your response, Ms. Jensen?
Your Honor, Blake Doncourt is the CEO of this company. He is in charge of the studies that his company runs, and he specifically said that no valid evidence directly links Drufo to cancer, meaning that there was evidence that he didn't believe to be valid.
All right. I'm going to overrule. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a reply, Ms. Apodaca?
Yes, I was just simply suggesting that Mr. Doncourt truly doesn't exactly know the impacts of Drufo and cancer because he's a CEO of a company and not an expert in those type of fields. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to overrule the objection at this time, finding that Mr. Doncourt can answer the question if he has personal knowledge.
Thank you. Mr. Doncourt, there were studies about this risk.
Yes.
But you didn't believe these studies to be valid.
My research team didn't believe they were valid.
And you are the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
Yes, I am the CEO.
So you were in charge of your research team?
Yes.
Moving on. You called Carson Durst a regrettable disappointment.
Yes.
And you were angry when Carson Durst went to work for your rival.
Yes, I was.
You believed Carson Durst to be violating his non-disclosure agreement.
I do believe that.
And if Terra Greenery would learn your trade secrets, Lush Fertilizer would be hurt financially.
Yes.
You said Carson Durst was earning more money than any researcher should earn.
Yes.
And more than Lush could afford to pay.
Sorry, you just cut out. Can you restate that?
Of course. And more than Lush could afford to pay.
Yes.
Moving on. Again, Mr. Doncourt, you're the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
Yes.
You're responsible for your employees.
Yes.
You said Mr. Durst did not do his job.
Yes, I would say that.
While he was under your supervision.
Yes.
But he failed to do his job.
Well, I mean, it's kind of up to the person, but me is not gonna, like, I can't influence the work he's gonna do. I may like be his boss, but I wouldn't say I directly like have any impact on his work ethic.
Thank you. You would never intentionally harm other human beings, correct?
No.
And you knew that baking the fertilizer would remove any risk of its causing cancer?
Can you restate that, please?
Yes. And you knew that baking the fertilizer would remove any risk of its causing cancer?
Yes.
But you would never even negligently harm other human beings?
Yes, I would not choose to do that.
And because it cost too much money, you didn't bake the fertilizer?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Doncourt, can you turn, there we go. Go ahead, Ms. Apodaca.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Doncourt, regarding the profit that Lush gained as a company, what were some of the things that you seek to do with the money?
Like I've said before, 10%
Your
of our
Honor,
annual
objection, relevant.
Ms. Apodaca, what's the relevance?
I'm just simply asking Mr. Doncourt really what he would say Lush decided to do with the money, just to figure out like if there were any ulterior motives and really just attest to Mr. Doncourt's character.
Ms.
Your Honor,
Benson.
This is still not relevant to the case because we are here to talk about Dakota Weir's damages, and what he does with the money is not relevant.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Go ahead, Ms. Apodaca.
No further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Jensen, I don't believe a question was asked that would warrant recross at this point in time because the court sustained the one objection. So we'll go ahead and move on without recross.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Would the defense please call their next witness?
the defendant calls Skylar Weirs to the stand. My video isn't-
All right,
I'm sorry, my video isn't starting.
that's okay. Here we go. I think we have everybody on video. Mr.
Okay.
Weirs, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you a few questions, Mr. Weirs. So, can you state your name for the record?
Skylar Weirs.
And what is your profession?
I'm an investigative journalist for The Rationalist.
And what do you specifically write for The Rationalist? I'm sorry, you cut off.
And
I think your microphone's muted.
counsel, I'm going to have you mute after you ask your question, just so we don't get that feedback.
Okay.
I'm an investigative journalist for The Rationalist.
Do you have any background knowledge on the drug Drufo?
Yes, I do. I did extensive research for it, and it's been a year researching it.
Drufo?
I'm sorry you cut out. Can you please repeat the question?
Have you published any scholarly articles on Drufo?
Yes, I have.
And would you say that you know a lot about Drufo compared to some scientists?
I would say that I do know a lot about Drufo compared to normal people and some scientists, yes.
Your Honor, I would like to offer Skylar Weirs as an expert on modern agritech.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Skylar Weirs is not a scientist and is only an investigative journalist, and so he cannot be entered as an expert on Drufo.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and admit the witness at this time as an expert. Go ahead, counselor. You may continue with your questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, what is your relationship with Dakota?
Dakota is my twin.
And why did you take a job in landscaping with your sibling?
I did not because I am allergic to grass.
How has your relationship with them been?
It has not been a stereotypical relationship with a twin, but they are family.
Are you worried about this case affecting your relationship with your family further by going against Dakota?
Objection, relevance.
Response?
Your Honor, I'm just trying to lay a foundation on the relationship my witness has to the case.
Reply?
Your Honor, Skylar Weir's relationship with his twin has nothing to do with Dakota Weir's damages or Lush Fertilizer's negligence.
I'm going to overrule the objection, finding that this testimony may address any bias or motivation of the witness. Go ahead, counselor.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I'm going to move on. Is Dakota's cancer treatment expensive?
Yes, very expensive.
And are your parents alive?
Yes, they are.
Well, counselor, your computer cut out. I don't think we heard that last question.
Anything?
I don't know if it's just my computer or is everybody having a hard time hearing?
Yes, I can't hear her.
Can you hear me?
That's better. Why don't you try the question again?
Okay, sorry. Do you believe that when they pass away, you will inherit anything?
Objection, speculation.
Response?
I do not believe this is a speculation on the witness's part, since this is involvements between him and his family.
Your Honor, the question specifically called for speculation, asking what he believes, and he has no way to know what will happen in the future with this.
All right, I'm going to sustain the objection, finding that the proper foundation has not been laid and finding that the question calls for speculation.
Thank you, Your Honor. Skylar, are you wealthy?
No, I am not.
Is there a big portion of your inheritance from your parents dedicated to Dakota's treatment?
Yes, sir. As my father already said that if he were to lose this case, he would take most of the financial strain of the treatment.
So if Dakota's side lost this case, how would you be financially?
I would be negatively impacted because of the previously mentioned inheritance that would probably go to Dakota's treatment.
So why are you defending the use of Drufo?
Because Drufo is the biggest and most important agriculture thing to happen since probably forever, and it would greatly help the war.
Is Drufo the only possibly harmful substance found in grass seed products?
No, there were several others, and no every product has something harmful about it.
Are there any benefits of using Drufo instead of these other substances like arsenic and glyphosate?
Yes, there is. Both arsenic and glyphosate have both been proven to be carcinogenic and cause cancer. There's been no such study about Drufo.
Have there been a lot of studies on this?
Yes, there has been.
How?
Can you repeat the question?
You said Drufo was less harmful to the environment than other chemicals, so how?
The compound in Drufo is beneficial, and it also puts less nitrogen into the ground, causing less dead zones in our oceans and lakes.
So would you say Drufo is actually better than other agriculture companies in this area?
Objection, leading question.
Response?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Let me rephrase that question.
All right, sustained. Go ahead and rephrase.
How would you compare Drufo to other agriculture companies in this area?
Compare by saying Drufo is far ahead of the competition in this area because a lot of other fertilizers still put nitrogen in their products, leading to nitrogen runoffs and dead zones in lakes and oceans.
Sorry, who do you think Dakota should have looked to for the cause of non-Hodgkin's instead?
Objection calls for speculation.
Response?
My witness has been entered as an expert witness, so I think he has the opinion on this.
A reply?
Yes, Your Honor, but the question still calls for speculation, asking him who he thinks asking him what he thinks somebody else should have done, and it is not his way.
I'm going to overrule the objection at this time.
Mr. Weirs, do you need me to restate the question?
Yes, please.
Who do you think Dakota should have looked to for the cause of non-Hodgkin's instead?
I think there are several places that Dakota should have looked. Possibly at the landscaping company that did not make them wear protective gear during the use of the fertilizer.
Do you think Dakota's ailment would have been worse if he had used other pesticides rather than Drufo?
Yes, I think that Drufo has a lesser. I think that the other ones would have given her a worse condition.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Weirs. No further questions.
Thank you. Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, you're an investigative journalist, yes?
Yes,
And you write for The Rationalist,
yes,
a magazine made to promote scientific skepticism.
correct.
And do you have a college degree?
I do not.
Mr. Weirs, you've written about many topics,
Yes.
and you'll write about anything?
Where I specialize in, I spent most of my writing career on agriculture and agritech.
And this pays well?
No, it does not. I have another job working at Applebee's.
So you have to work as a part-time server just to get by?
Yes, I do.
And you have gambling debt?
That's my personal life, and I tend to keep that separate from my work.
Mr. Weirs, do you remember writing a witness statement?
Yes, I do.
Do you have it in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Can you please turn to the last page of your witness statement?
Okay, I'm there.
Is that your signature on the page?
Yes, it is.
Now, Mr. Weirs, can you turn to line 100 of your witness statement for me?
Okay, I'm there.
Thank you. Now, you said that you are a gambler.
Counselor, Counselor, can you repeat the question? I think you may have cut out a moment.
Yes, of course. You said here that you are admittedly a gambler.
Yes, I did.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
And response?
Your Honor, this information is relevant because it is laying foundation to show that Mr. Weirs has bias in this case.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Go ahead.
The witness has clearly stated that he keeps his private life and his work life separate. This is improper character evidence.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Go ahead, Counselor, you may resume your questions.
Okay. Mr. Weirs, in your journalism, you've written about Drufo.
Yes, I have.
And you don't believe that lush fertilizer is dangerous?
All fertilizers are dangerous. I believe that lush has less of a danger than other fertilizers.
And you haven't researched Drufo yourself?
Yes, I have researched Drufo.
Have you done tests on Drufo yourself? You said you weren't a scientist.
No, I've not done tests myself, but I have looked at the research and I reviewed articles written by scientists.
Thank you. You said Lush's active ingredient is nitrogen,
Yes, that's one of them.
and that nitrogen is known to contribute to cancer.
Yes, it is.
And Drufo is a chemical fertilizer.
Yes, but no study has been done proving that the nitrogen does cause cancer.
And you said that there will never truly be a safe chemical fertilizer.
Correct.
And Drufo is a pesticide.
Yes.
And in your own words, you stated that pesticide is poison.
Yes, poison that would not affect humans or would not affect them negatively.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. So, Skylar, do you think that a lot of people can be knowledgeable and scholarly without having a college degree?
Yes, I do.
Do you think articles contain a lot of important information even if you haven't done the tests yourself?
Yes, I do.
Do you think the knowledge and intelligence of one is dictated by a certification they have on a piece of paper?
No, I do not.
Barely scraping by on money. If your family lost this case, wouldn't that impact you negatively?
Yes, it would, but Drufo is such a revolutionary pesticide and fertilizer that I need to do what I testify on behalf of Drufo.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Defense can call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand. Good afternoon, Dr. Williams. Today I'm going to ask you a few questions, okay?
Hazelby, hold on just a minute. Dr. Williams, will you
Sorry.
raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Hazelby.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Williams. Today I'm going to ask you a few questions, all right?
Yes.
Would you please state your name for the record?
My name is Dr. Devin Williams.
Do you work at Lush Fertilizer?
Yes, I do.
How long have you been working at Lush Fertilizer?
I've been working at Lush for roughly a decade.
All right, and what's your job description?
I lead the toxicology research and development labs at Lush, and my role would be to determine whether potentially harmful chemicals, as a research toxicologist, would be determine whether potentially harmful chemicals could have an effect on humans and how to neutralize that harm if it were to happen.
Okay, and to someone unfamiliar with toxicology, how would you explain it?
Toxicology is the study of potentially harmful chemicals and how they would affect different biological systems, how to neutralize harm if it were to happen.
Thank you for that explanation. And have you received a PhD in toxicology?
Yes, I
Objection,
have.
leading question.
Response?
May I rephrase my question, Your Honor?
Certainly, sustained. Go ahead and rephrase your question.
Have you received any education in the field of toxicology?
Yes, I did receive my PhD in toxicology from the Colorado State University.
Thank you. And please look through your materials for Exhibit 9 and let me know when you're ready to proceed.
I am ready to proceed.
Thank you. Are you familiar with Exhibit 9?
Yes.
Okay, and what is Exhibit 9?
Exhibit 9 would be my current curriculum vitae, which sets forth my educational and professional work background.
And is your name included on Exhibit 9?
Yes, it is.
And is everything on Exhibit 9 accurate?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move the court to admit Exhibit 9 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 9 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you mind reading the first 2 bullet points under education?
Colorado State University College of Pharmacy and Allied Health Professions, PhD and MS. University of Utah Practicum Certificate Program in Pharmacotoxicology and BS in Toxicology in 1993.
And after receiving your PhD, did you continue to get any other certifications in toxicology?
Yes, I earned certifications in Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Utah.
Thank you. And have you participated in any publications on toxicology?
Yes, I do have numerous publications.
Your Honor, permission to name Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in the field of toxicology.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
The witness will so be admitted.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Devin Williams, I will be asking you a few questions regarding your work at Lush Fertilizer, okay?
Okay.
Are you aware that Lush Fertilizer is banned in France?
Yes, I am
Objection,
very
leading question.
Response?
May I rephrase my question, Your Honor?
Certainly. The objection will be sustained. Go ahead and rephrase.
Is Lush Fertilizer banned anywhere?
Yes, Lush Fertilizer is banned in France.
Is it banned anywhere else?
It is banned throughout the entirety of the European Union and including other smaller countries like Haiti or Liberia.
Are these bans over risk concerns? Or let me
Not-
rephrase. Yeah, are they over any cancer risk concerns?
Absolutely not.
Then why are these bans in place?
The European Union chose to prohibit the use of any additional fertilizers that may contribute incidental nitrate accumulations under lab tests, which are not congruent to real-world conditions, meaning that they do not accurately reflect the positive impact that Drufo has under real-world conditions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. And moving on, I will be asking you a few questions about your work with Drufo, okay?
Okay.
And you were involved in testing the safety at Drufo at Lush Fertilizer, correct?
Objection, leading question.
Response?
My apologies, Your Honor. May I rephrase?
Please do so. Sustain.
Were you involved in any testing at Lush Fertilizer regarding Drufo?
Yes, I was.
And were you able to find any statistical correlation between non-Hodgkin lymphoma or any other type of cancer?
No, there was absolutely no statistical evidence that there was a relationship between Drufo and the cause of cancer.
However, are there any scientists that might disagree with this?
Yes, I am perfectly aware that there are other scientists that may argue other ideas.
And are you familiar with Dr. Casey Rogers?
I am familiar with Dr. Casey Rogers.
And are you familiar with his study on Drufo being possibly carcinogenic?
Yes, I have looked at the study.
What was the premise of his study?
The premise of the study was comparing a control group of people that had never been exposed to Drufo and people who had been exposed to numerous different environmental conditions, which was a completely invalid study.
And as an expert witness, would you agree with his study?
No, I would not.
Would you elaborate a little bit more on that point?
The study was not peer-reviewed, it was not replicated, which science is replete with studies that could never be replicated. And Dr. Rogers is also financially biased in this case, and the case itself—
Objection, speculation.
Response?
The question at hand was just asking if, as an expert, if Dr. Williams agrees with the conclusions, the methodology, and the research that went into creating Dr. Rogers' study.
May I respond?
Please.
The question itself does not call for speculation, but Dr. Williams speculated as to Dr. Casey Rogers' motivations for testifying, which she cannot speak to.
And so for the plaintiff's attorney, counselor, are you asking the court to strike the latter portion of the witness's statement?
Yes.
The court will strike the portion of the witness's statement related to the other doctor's motivations and testifying. Go ahead and continue, Ms. Hazel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now I'm going to change topics a little bit and talk a little bit more about what happens to develop cancer, and as an expert witness, ask you a little bit more about developing cancer and what that looks like. Can cancer develop randomly?
It can.
Could you give us an example of how this random development might work?
If you take any large group of people, a certain number of them are going to develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that have reasons that would have nothing to do with a substance like Drufo.
And could lifestyle even play a role in developing cancer?
Lifestyle, of course, would play a role in developing cancer, yes.
And is fertilizer more dangerous for those who work with it more often?
Yes, which is one of the reasons why Dr. Rogers' study was perhaps could be deemed as inaccurate, because they were looking at people who had been exposed to numerous environmental conditions compared to that of people who had been exposed to very few.
So would farmers and gardeners' lifestyle put them at greater risk for developing things like non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Objection,
Yes.
leading question.
Response?
My question included just two examples of people who work with fertilizers often, and I was just asking my witness simply if this type of lifestyle, in her expert opinion, could lead to somebody having a greater chance of developing non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Is there a reply?
Your Honor, while I recognize that there were two options given, they were still options given for an answer, rather than asking the witness a general question.
The court's going to overrule the objection, finding that it wasn't leading in nature.
All right, and is it statistically proven that, is my previous question statistically proven?
No, it is not. Oh, yes, it is. I apologize, Your Honor. I misspoke. Yes, it is.
And finally, according to your research, do fertilizers with Drufo present an elevated risk of being carcinogenic in comparison with other fertilizers?
No, in comparison to other fertilizers, fertilizers with Drufo have not been correlated with any statistically significant increase in the case of non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
No further questions. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thank you, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, you've worked for Lush for a long time.
A decade, yes.
And you're a supervisor there.
Yes, I do oversee the labs.
So you're loyal to this company.
I would deem myself as loyal, yes.
Which means you have a financial interest here.
I think that my testifying in this case and trying to prove what's right has nothing to do with my relation to the company.
But you do have a financial interest, as you admitted.
I work at Lush.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Response?
Your Honor, the witness did not answer the question.
Any reply?
My witness did answer the question.
All right. The court's going to overrule the objection finding that the witness answer was non-responsive to the question. Go ahead, Counselor.
Thank you. I'm just going to re-ask that question. You have a financial interest in this case.
I have equally as much of a financial interest as any other expert witness or honestly witness would have in this case.
Thank you. You were brought onto the DRUFO development team about halfway through its testing.
Yes.
This was when there was employee turnover.
About 50% of the team had moved on, yes.
So testing timelines were rushed.
I believe that would be a speculation. I think that testing timelines might not have been how they originally were, but.
May I draw your attention to your witness statement? If
Yes.
we could just turn to page 28. That is your signature, Dr. Rogers?
Yes, that is my signature.
And in your witness statement, could we turn to line 24?
I am there.
Apologies, Dr. Williams. Still turning to the page. Thank you. Can you just read from as the turnover?
As the turnover was beginning to impact testing timelines.
Indeed. So your role was to fill in as a technician there.
Yes, it was.
Because testing timelines were beginning to be impacted by the fact that there were so few workers.
The timelines were being impacted, again, not necessarily rushed.
Okay, Dr. Williams. France is not the only country that has DRUFO banned.
Yes, that is correct.
In fact, it's actually the entire European Union.
Exactly.
And Lush didn't fight that.
Lush did not have the regulatory structure in place to fight it at the time, no.
They thought it would be too costly.
It would have been too costly. We were a brand new company.
But Lush is now making plans to appeal for reconsideration of this decision.
Yes.
And Ms. Weir's winning this lawsuit would disrupt those plans.
Yes, of course it would have an impact on those plans.
Which means more work for you and your colleagues.
I think that it would have an impact on our work. But...
Your Honor, relevance.
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor. This goes to the bias of this witness. Once again, if they have to do more work and those plans of reconsideration would be disrupted, that would be costly for the company that this witness works at.
Any reply?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the court's going to overrule the objection. The witness may answer.
I will restate that question.
Yes.
Which means more work for you and your colleagues?
I think that if the U.S. court were to find that DRUFO did cause cancer, it would have an enormous impact on the company itself, which you could make an assumption might mean more work, but I don't think that is impacting my bias in this case.
And Lush fertilizer products can be manufactured without DRUFO.
They can, and they are being manufactured without DRUFO.
Yes, they've only made that adjustment in the EU, though, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you cannot say with 100% confidence that DRUFO does not cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Nothing can be ever said in science with 100% confidence.
But you continue to add this chemical to your products despite the risk.
Yes, but we believe that the effect that it's having in the real world far outweighs the less than 1% chance that it could cause cancer.
Your Honor, no further questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Dr. Devin Williams, Dr. Devin Williams, have you had other jobs besides this job?
Yes, I have.
And those jobs have paid you?
Yes.
And I have one final question for you, and that just pertains how cancer develops, just feeding off the interview from the plaintiff. So why would it be hard to say that something causes cancer?
Cancer can develop in people that have reasons that we can't fully determine, or that have come from various different things that they have done.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Devin Williams. No further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, thank you. Does the defense have any additional witnesses? Does the defense have any additional witnesses?
Sorry, we're having internet issues. What did you say, Your Honor?
Does the defense have any additional witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
All right, I think that will take us to our closing arguments. Would the prosecution go ahead and make their closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Lush Fertilizer ruined Dakota Weir's life because Lush does not care. Lush Fertilizer was negligent. They failed to do their duty to their customers to keep them safe and prevent any harm coming to them from their product. Remember, jury instruction 2 states that since we have proven that Drufo is contained in Lush Fertilizer.
Miss Jensen, I'm going to actually, your technology kind of cut out there. Right when you were starting to reference the instruction.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Would you like me
okay.
to restart?
Why don't you go ahead and pick up where you were at you referenced the instruction, the jury instruction.
Okay, thank you. Remember, jury instruction 2 states that since we have proven that Drufo is contained in Lush Fertilizer, since we have proven that the defendant Lush Fertilizer was negligent and failed to protect its users, since we have proven that Dakota Weir should have reasonably been expected to use Lush Fertilizer, and since we have proven that Lush Fertilizer was the cause of Dakota Weir's cancer, your verdict, jury members, must be for Dakota Weir's. Number 1, we have proven that Drufo is in Lush Fertilizer. Not only have we shown you physical evidence, but many, including the CEO of Lush itself, have stated in their sworn testimonies that it does. Number 2, we have proven that the defendant was negligent and failed to exercise reasonable care to prevent its users from having unreasonable risk. There was no warning about Drufo in Lush Fertilizer packaging, no warning that Lush Fertilizer contained a known carcinogen that has been banned in other countries for its danger to users. No, Dakota Weirs is not the only person who has developed cancer after using Lush Fertilizer. Dr. Casey Rogers informed us that when studied, people who have used Lush Fertilizer are 10 times more likely to develop cancer, specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, than those who haven't. This was no one-time accident. No, Lush will continue to harm people with their fertilizer if your verdict today is not for Dakota Weirs, because Lush does not care. Lush employees found that not only may Drufo contain a known carcinogen, but that it was one linked specifically to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And yet they neglected to continue studying, neglected to even pose a single warning about Druffo's dangers. If there had been but a single warning about Druffo's dangers on Lush fertilizer, people could have taken proper precautions. But no, because Lush does not care. Lush knew there was a reasonable chance that Druffo causes cancer, and that they did not take reasonable measures to prevent that risk. They did not bake the fertilizer, which would have made it so that there was no risk that the fertilizer was carcinogenic. Lush Fertilizer did not want to take the time or spend the money to research even a moment more to keep their clients safe, and they did not want to use the little effort it took to put a simple warning on their product. Even Lush Fertilizer's witnesses admit that Druffo is dangerous. Skylar Weirs told us that Druffo is a pesticide, and what were their words? Pesticide is, by definition, poison. They stated that nitrogen is the main ingredient in Lush Fertilizer, known to contribute to various types of cancer, and yet they didn't put a single warning on the packaging because they were negligent. 3. We have proven that Dakota Weirs is a person who should reasonably be expected to use Lush Fertilizer, working every day at a landscaping job. 4. We have proven that Dakota Weirs' damages were most certainly caused by Lush Fertilizer. There were other workers at Dakota Weirs' landscaping job, and yet Mr. Weirs, using Lush Fertilizer, developed cancer. Other than work, Dakota Weirs and his twin, Skylar, did all of the activities, and yet Dakota Weirs, using Lush Fertilizer, developed cancer. If there had been a warning issued by Lush, Dakota Weirs could have avoided all of this, and yet Dakota Weirs, using Lush Fertilizer, developed cancer. Lush Fertilizer knew that their product posed a possible danger to users, and yet Dakota Weirs, using Lush Fertilizer, developed cancer. Lush claims that the risk a known carcinogen would pose was low. They never said there was no carcinogen, and they never said there was no risk. Because of Lush's negligence, Mr. Weirs developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that will not allow him to live his life. He can no longer volunteer, go to school, or even play the piano. Instead, Dakota Weirs suffers at home, constantly in pain, no longer able to sit for long periods of time without experiencing shortness of breath and pain. Lush has made Dakota Weirs' life impossible to live. Lush was negligent, and because of that, jury members, your verdict must be for Dakota Weirs.
Closing arguments for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. May it please the court, counsel, members of the jury, good evening, Your Honor. Today we have all gathered here and heard the tragic story of Dakota Weirs. The defense sympathizes with Dakota and their pain. However, Lush is not responsible for causing Dakota's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. After listening to Dakota today in this trial, it was clear that Lush was not responsible for this event. But there is one thing that is clear as day, and that is that Dakota failed to wear protective clothing when handling multiple fertilizers and chemical products. Lush is to blame for all of this because of Druffo and Druffo alone? By using a plethora of chemicals and a variety of fertilizers, how likely is it truly that Dakota's cancer was caused solely by Lush's products? It does not add up. Let us not forget that Lush not only provided recommendations for the user on their products, but also remember that Dakota's boss clearly told Dakota to wear protective clothing as well. How is Lush to blame any more than Dakota's boss? If every product that could cause cancer had a warning on it that stated, "Watch out because I can cause cancer," nearly everything would have labels plastered all over them. This case truly is not about a company failing to label their products correctly. It has been made clear that Lush did that exactly. This case is about the irresponsible actions of a user that unfortunately resulted in an illness. Members of the jury, if you will examine instruction number 2 in your materials, it states, quote, "The plaintiff had damages that were caused by the defendant's negligence, while the product was being used in a manner the defendant should have reasonably expected," unquote. Today, the negligence was not that of the defendant, but the negligence has been demonstrated through that of the plaintiff. Instruction number 8 states, quote, "The plaintiff, Dakota Weirs, failed to do something that reasonably careful people would do under the same or similar circumstances to protect themselves from the claimed danger created by the product," unquote. Members of the jury, I would like you to ask yourselves what you would do in this position. Does a reasonable person choose to follow the recommendations that are being made, or does a reasonable person ignore the obvious recommendations being made and bring these consequences amongst themselves? Not to mention, Dakota has even been told that they can make a recovery. No doctor has ever told Dakota they're going to die from this illness. I would like to acknowledge the plaintiff's point that this case is about a greedy company seeking more money. Lush is not a greedy company. Lush has even donated plenty of their profit to environmental organizations and charities. So there's one question that I will leave you with today. Who is truly responsible for Dakota's illness? The company that clearly labeled their products correctly, or the irresponsibility of a user? Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. I'll ask the timekeepers. Does the plaintiff have any time remaining for rebuttal?
No, they don't.
Okay. Well, folks, I believe that concludes our trial today. Congratulations. Job well done, folks. I think at this point in time, if I remember correctly from the video, we get to make a few comments. Each of the scorekeepers and myself will get 1 to 2 minutes to make some comments. I just want to say to begin with, you all did a phenomenal job. You're all very clearly dedicated and did just an absolutely wonderful job. You should be very proud of yourselves. Very proud of yourselves, folks. Scorekeepers, do you need just a few minutes to finish filling out your scorecards?
Your Honor, I have done that completely, so I